Seiko is a brand that I've associated with value for money ever since I got into watches. They have delivered some of the best and the best value watches of all time. With watches like this, the SARB033, becoming a staple of many budget-friendly collections, or for anyone that's just been looking for a versatile and functional watch throughout the years. Since its release in 2008, it has become arguably one of Seiko's best all-round watches ever produced. However, in a world where we have a select few micro brands delivering fresh designs and companies like Orient producing watches that have an almost unbelievable specification list, our perceptions on value are changing. So in 2019, are Seiko still a value brand? Is one of their best value watches ever produced still a good buy? Or is it just all a bit of hype? Let's dig in and find out. Now straight up, I'll be honest and say that I was a little bit, I guess you could say, apprehensive about the SARB line of watches. Having never owned one, I had obviously heard and read about all of the praise, but hype can bring with it some crazy emotions, and people can ignore many faults that are in place on a watch. That being said, I think if you have any reservations about these watches, they do immediately go away when you pick them up for the first time. And if you've owned any other lower end Seikos, when you pick them up for the first time, you can feel that the bracelet and materials used just are a little poor in my opinion. The bracelet typically feels a little tinny, and that's just one thing that I immediately noticed when I picked up this watch. There was none of that. It feels good in the hands and to the touch. That tinny feeling isn't present, and the materials used feel good, in particular on the case. Measuring in at 38mm by 11mm in height, the case features a nice combination of brushed and polished surfaces. The lugs are separated and defined by some stepped brush sections that flow around the sides of the bezel, leading down the lugs. The lugs are beautifully shaped and taper aggressively. This means that we have a rather small lug to lug of 46mm, and this does help the watch sit on the wrist and helps overall in terms of comfort. And I'm going to touch more on the wearability and sizing shortly. While those sections leading down the lugs are brushed and they help tame down the formal vibe of this watch somewhat, the highly polished bezel gives a nice contrast against them, providing for an overall balanced look, which does help add to this watch's well-renowned versatility. And I think it's that versatility that is why this watch has been so successful over the years. The black dial is a safe bet in any collection, and here on this watch it's brilliantly executed. However, if you are looking for something a little more bright, well, you have this option as well, the SARB035. This is the white dial variant that shares many similarities with the 033, aside from the dial colours. Both are clean and classic dials, but they are not going to wow you when you first get this watch on the wrist or pick them up for the first time. They are a little plain in appearance, well to me anyway, being a simple three-handed watch. However, once again, this is something that adds to the overall versatility of these watches. I think it's when you start to take a closer look, and that's when you start to really appreciate just how well these watches are executed. That black base features a fine matte finish that appears glossy in most situations. It comes to life when it's hit with light, that you'll see throughout this review. And the white dial, it features a creamy shade that is not quite as playful, but it's up there. The dials feature applied hour markers that pop off the dial. These allow for easy reading. They feature a highly polished finish all round, and for the most part they are well finished. I must mention though, there are some particles here and there visible on the macro, but it's pretty clean overall, and these aren't visible at normal viewing distances. The date window at the 3 o'clock position takes place of the marker at 3 o'clock, and I think it's well integrated. I've touched base on this before that I like the background colour of the date wheel to match the dial. I think it just gives a bit of a cleaner look overall. And on both of these watches, Seiko has delivered with the date wheel closely matching the colour of the dials. The hand design and needle type seconds hand is one of, if not my all-time favourite sets from Seiko. They just suit this watch and the vibe of it perfectly. They are brightly polished and sharply cut. They taper to a fine point with the minute hand extending out to near the minutes track surrounding the dial. Within the hands we also see a generous amount of lume that helps with legibility if needed. From the sharp hands and the hand stack through to the applied markers and date window border, I'm pretty impressed with the level of detail on display here. And the finishing overall is good. I'd give it probably a B-, C+ if we're going to rank it. It's not the best I've seen, but I think it's appropriate for a watch in this price range. Under that dial and moving everything along, visible through the see-through case back, we can see the 6R15 beating away. While we don't have the super refined variations of finished surfaces here that we see on watches costing several times as much, it's all relative and there's still a good degree of finishing on display. There are some noticeable foreign particles and surfaces that are not quite finished to a high standard, but you get what you pay for, especially when you're talking about micro measurement variations. The gearing, bridges and plates have a raw industrial look to them, and call me weird, but I think this looks pretty cool. This movement is one of Seiko's mid-tier movements that features 23 joules, it's automatic winding, it beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, and it has a 50-hour power reserve, which for me is a huge positive. On the flip side, the movement is specified to run plus 25 or minus 15 seconds a day. But as with most Seiko watches, we typically see better accuracy than specified, and that's no different here. With these two watches, I've averaged plus 4 seconds a day fast on the 33 and plus 8 seconds a day fast on the 35 or the white dial version, and this has been averaged over a 5-day period, which is pretty good. Accuracy though can be a little hit and miss on Seiko movements, and this is why their specifications are so wide. It's a way for them to, I guess, relax on regulation from factory and reduce the number of warranty repairs or fixes required straight out of the box. For me, I'd love to see Seiko put their reputation on the line a little more and step up their game in this respect. Offer tighter specified accuracy standards across their entire lineup, especially with their prices creeping up and up. Wrapping around the wrist is a solid oyster style bracelet. The bracelet does away with any screws in the link adjustment and retains push pins with small collars that seat inside the center lugs. This is just something to note, and I'm not a fan of it personally. They can just get a little finicky and you can lose them pretty easily. The clasp is pretty simple in design with a single lock that requires you to press in each of the pushes on the side. On the wrist, while the watch and bracelet do feel decent, the lack of micro adjustment or even half links to refine fitment really annoyed me. I just could not get the right fit. Immediately when I wore these two watches, I was actually totally against both of them and was convinced that these were just overhyped. The watches would not sit right on the wrist, they felt unbalanced and uncomfortable, and I understand that they are a pretty small watch at 38mm and I've got a 7.5 inch wrist. They've also got a lug to lug of 46mm. However, these smaller watches are usually a lot better on the wrist than what I experienced. My negativity though changed really quickly when I switched out the bracelets for some leather straps. I primarily done this for the review just to see how they look and to see if that would improve things. And to be honest, it entirely changed the watches for me. The black dial and this brown croc strap was a favourite combination of mine, and it shifted the watch from something that I was going to review and simply move out the door to something that I am now likely to keep. This small change really improved these watches for me. And whether you're talking about the white dial or the black dial, comfort, function, legibility and versatility are just some of the words that I would use to describe these classic Seikos. And while we do have some incredible micro brands on the rise and companies like Orient producing, like I said earlier, some amazingly well valued watches, I think Seiko still own the market under that $1,000 range. They have such a huge range of options available with a brand name that I think is almost an automatic reaction when people ask for watches in this price range. It just comes out naturally. For me, however, the value for money aspect we associate with Seiko could shift, and I think it's shifting, with not only Seiko themselves to blame, but with some other micro brands on the rise and smartwatches increasing their market share. I really think that if Seiko don't tighten their quality control and don't offer better movements in the near future, yet continue to increase prices, that value proposition that Seiko once was will quickly fade away. Fortunately, these two watches, the SARB033 and SARB035, were produced during a time where Seiko really produced some of the best bang for buck watches available. And in 2019, some 11 years after initial release, and even though they're discontinued, I really think that these two are still a solid buy and some of the best all-round watches under $500. Now these are still readily available, and I'm going to drop a couple of links in the description. They're not affiliated or anything, they're just companies that pop up and they're reputable, so I'll put them in the description. But guys, that's just my thoughts, and I would love to hear your thoughts on what we've covered here today. You know, is Seiko still a value brand, or are they losing it? What are the best all-round watches under $500? Or even what are your experiences with these two watches that we've looked at today? Do you prefer the black or the white dial? There's plenty for us to chat about, so please drop a comment below and get involved in the conversation. Also, don't forget about the giveaway of this book, which I'll announce next week. I'll drop the details in the description if you didn't watch last week's video. Anyway guys, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up. Loved it. Be sure to subscribe. Until next time, see ya.